Welcome back to the Djellab YouTube channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys are doing well. This week has been very interesting, Patrick, as you see. Just you joining me today. I love the denim jacket.
Thank you.
The hat's very nice as well.
Merch.
If you guys want to check that out, make sure you go over to Pat's podcast, The Unseen Incidents, as well. But a big week this week, Pat. The season ended. I thought, okay, nice. No more talk about Chelsea for a little while. We'll be out of the picture. The Euros, let's enjoy that. Then maybe the transfer rumours really start hotting up. We get to the second day of the season ending, and Pochettino left the club mutually after a kind of mid-contract review between the board, really. Never a dull day. Never a dull day, I think, being a Chelsea fan.
There was one dull day.
Yeah, literally one dull day. And even that, I think, like the Willian confirmation happened about him joining Chelsea. So if you guys live under a rock, Pochettino has left Chelsea. I think there's a lot of Chelsea fans that are quite upset, which is weird. Me and Pat were talking about it off camera a second ago and saying how if this had happened maybe a month ago, a lot less people, I think, would be complaining. It's the fact that we've seen in the last month Chelsea kind of click in some way and have results go their way and obviously go up the leaderboard and finish in the 6th position, which could mean Europa League football, depending on the FA Cup this weekend and if Man City win it. How do you think Chelsea fans should feel, Pat, over this kind of mutual termination? Because that's what I think. That's what I do think it is. I don't think it's a sacking. I don't think it's the fact that like the board were unhappy with what Poch had done. I think the board said, look, we might look at wanting to sell Gallagher. We kind of want to go in this direction. And Poch kind of said, well, I don't want that to happen. And they agreed to part ways, is how I feel like it's gone down.
If I were a Chelsea fan, I would be quite angry about it because you've invested a year in this. And whoever comes in next, like maybe their system is like easier to learn. I think that's probably the case for some of these guys. But also, I'd say, like, well, why did we do that? Like, why did we bother doing that? Like, it feels like everybody's... I guess everybody's kind of learned each other's games a bit.
Yeah.
So that's happened a little bit. And you have seen flashes of, like, how good this Chelsea side could be, I think. What I will say is that if you would have been okay with it a month ago, you should still be okay with it now. Because we were talking about this off air, but, like, Chelsea's results in that last month of the season are maybe a little bit unrepresentative of where they actually are. Like, it kind of looked like they were bad all season and then things clicked and they got good. And I actually don't really think that is what happened. If you look at the underlying numbers in those games, and you were saying, if you watch these games, but I don't do that. I only look at spreadsheets.
Yeah, of course.
Then you kind of think, this is kind of the same Chelsea it's been all season, really. Now, I think they deserve to end up in that position in the table. So I think these results kind of corrected a bit of poor luck over the course of the season, especially poor luck with injuries as well. But I don't think that it was like some enormous like revelation moment where it was like, finally, Poch football is like happening at Stamford Bridge. Obviously, it would have been easier to sack him like after losing like
5-0 to Arsenal.
5-0 to Arsenal. That would have been a great time to do it if you were going to do it. But
do you not think? I think they've learned there where they, for instance, the Potter situation the year before, where it wasn't going well, and they were like, okay, let's just sack him now, get in a temp manager, and then we can spend a bit of time trying to find the one after him. And it means that kind of we've written off the season now and don't have to worry. And I think they might have learned from that situation to a degree and gone, all right, look, like... And to be fair, I don't think there was as much... Like, things weren't going anywhere near as wrong as they were going for Potter. And so there was no possible need to. And they thought, let's just... Rather than deal with that whole situation, getting Frank Lampard back in for a 4th term, it's just for a couple of months, like... Let's just let Poch deal with it. Get
doing a hitting.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also think, do you not just think it was a financial decision? As in,
true.
Like, obviously it looks like they had some sort of break clause at the end of the season, which meant that rather than paying him out this 10 mil compensation package, they've obviously paid him somewhat less. Like, who knows how much less, but like enough for him to be okay with it, not so much that it killed them. I doubt they could have done that before the end of the season. If they'd sacked him after the Chelsea game, he would have probably been like, £10 million, please. And Chelsea would have been like,
we've got a month left.
We don't have that. We need to send that to Brazil, like for another child.
Literally.
We need to buy another child. But I don't know. I think it's one of those things where like Pochettino can feel hard done by, but I wonder if he simultaneously is a bit like,
Yeah.
Okay, so it's kind of like the UK general election just getting called, and people are like, well, here's the list of like crises coming down the pipeline for like whoever is prime minister next, and it's like, if you were Rishi Sunak, you would be like, get me out of here before one of these hits. Like, everyone hates me as it is, but before, like, you know, Thames water collapses or something like this, it feels a little bit that way.
I did see that.
So list, like Poch being like, I've worked out a midfield, and the glue that sticks it together, as we talked about before, is called Conor Gallagher. Yeah. And he's gone into the meeting, and Chelsea said, we're going to sell Conor Gallagher, and he said, please don't do that. He's one of the few players I like and trust, and they've said, we're doing it. And he's like, okay. And they're like, Thiago Silva's going, and they said, look, we're going to invest in more youngsters. I don't know. I would probably look around. Even like, I think someone like Reece James, you know, Reece James and Chilwell and all these guys who can be great when they're fit. I'd be like, are they ever going to be fit? Nkunku, like, is he ever going to be fit?
I think one of their, because it was interesting if you read the reports that apparently Chelsea went in very data heavy. They went in saying that supposedly like some numbers didn't look that great. There was one report saying they'd used like big chances missed. Yeah. And I was thinking, like, surely that's not what they've done. Because
that's why Nick Jackson had his Instagram post with like his head in his hands. Or whatever. You're like, Nick, this is on you.
But I was like, big chances missed is actually kind of a good stat because it shows that you are creating multiple chances.
Yeah, the other clubs who
it's working.
It's like, isn't it like Man City, Bayern, Barca? Like, these are the top sides in Europe for big chances. So like, they all had such embarrassing seasons.
And sometimes I always wonder, like, well, Bayern to a degree. And sometimes I always
not in attack.
Yeah, fair. And sometimes I always wonder, like, whether actually some of these reports are fully worth believing or whatever. But the bottom line, Pochettino has left Chelsea. Chelsea are now looking for a young and progressive manager. Like that
like
same
50-year-old Thomas Frank.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Sure.
Or even someone like, I feel like if that headline would have fit Graham Potter perfectly about a year ago. And so they kind of, it seems like they want to go back to this kind of idea of it. And you mentioned Thomas Frank's in this list, but Thomas Tuchel isn't. And I think maybe that's slightly due to other issues in terms of the way things ended, and maybe not wanting to work with the Clear Lake board and such. I think, to be fair, that's quite understandable. But if you look at the current, I guess, favourites, according to the odds, Roberto De Zerbi is the number one. Then you've got Kieran McKenna, who is also up there, got promoted with Ipswich to the Premier League. Thomas Frank, Ruben Amorim, Thomas Tuchel, again, don't think it's going to happen. Cesc Fabregas, obviously just got promoted to Serie A with Como. Sebastian Hunes, Jose Mourinho, Ralph Rangnick, Miguel Sanchez, obviously of Girona fame.
No Company.
No Vincent Company.
Missed out on Vincent Company.
He's off the Bayern Munich by the looks of it. Bless him.
What's happening?
I had Jacob texting me being like, what's happened to the world where you can get relegated from the Premier League and go to Bayern Munich?
If they signed Rob Edwards, I would have been more
a little bit. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I get it.
Fair enough. But those are the kind of favourites. We're going to go through a bunch of these managers, have a little chat about them. I think it's a little bit difficult for us to kind of talk about how the style of play they want to play, where it kind of feels like Chelsea have their own idea of what they want to do by talking about this progressive manager. They want someone to have an attacking first football that is possession dominant and maybe not defensive first, which is why maybe some names won't happen, to be quite honest. And we can go through a few of them. Let's start it off with a guy that I think he's been wanted by a few clubs. Ipswich are super keen to keep him. They're talking about trying to give him a deal of 100k a week. Brighton are also after him as well. Kieran McKenna and what he's done. Because in terms of the success over the last few years, it's incredible. To go from a League One club to a Premier League club in back-to-back in 2 years, in 2 seasons, is super impressive. And has done it with players who, again, they've used like data-led farms and stuff to make sure they can try and find these guys and impressive guys and get like loans in like Amari Hutchinson, young kids who have big futures. And I think the way he's managed them and managed these players has been really impressive. Like goals are kind of spread out throughout the team as well. But also when he brought in someone like Amari Hutchinson, who hasn't really dealt with first team football, it wasn't, okay, we're chucking you in straight away. In fact, for the first half of the season, very much so, he wasn't really being used. And then, slowly but surely, it would be off the bench, has an impact. And then by the end of the season, he was managing to have a starting place. Now, he has grown. I think he had a lot of negative comments about him when he was at Manchester United under Ole. I think there were people saying that the players there at the time weren't big fans of him and thought he wasn't very impressive. And actually, he's left there and gone on to do a good job. And I think, obviously, actually, if you look at a few of those staff, they've gone on to do a good job. He is supposedly a really good communicator. I think Chelsea need this as well with such a young squad that they have. That's the one worry I have after the kind of way things went with Potter, is you don't want a squad where, and a lot of these players, to be fair, have left now. It's a very, very young squad. But you don't want a squad where kind of they look at the new manager and go like, who are you? We don't want to kind of fight for you or work for you because we don't really believe in what you are, what you've done. You've just been promoted from the Championship, right? And Potter had at least some Premier League experience behind him. That's not to say McKenna would do that. I think that's all about kind of the first impression you make as a manager. And so he likes to play positional football. What do we feel about Kieran McKenna? Because a lot of question marks, I feel, are up in the air. I think seeing him with his Ipswich side in the Premier League would have been a really nice bridge, I guess, to see what he can bring in the top division.
I mean, honestly, like, with him, as with all the managers we're going to talk about, I don't have that much to say. Like, I'm like, these are good managers. I think these are good, interesting managers. Whether they are good enough for Chelsea next year is quite a big question. Like, Kieran McKenna might end up being the best manager in the world. So might Seb Hernus. But it might not happen next year. It might happen
in 5 years.
It might happen in 10 years. Yeah. Like, that's completely reasonable. And so from that point of view, I kind of think, well, anyone here is going to be a gamble. To me, what's more interesting is that there are other factors at play. I think cost is a big factor here.
Yeah.
I think that the theory is you've got rid of Poch. You haven't had to pay out his full package, but you've had to pay him a bit. You need to get somebody in who's cheap. Like, and all these guys basically are cheap. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're not talking about Tuchel as well. I think it's a financial thing. Probably also with Tuchel leaving Bayern, it's one of those things where a condition of like the payoff he gets from Bayern is he doesn't take a job for a while, or that club pays it. So Chelsea cannot afford to do that. So I think it makes sense for them to look at someone like McKenna. McKenna, like, very impressive. And I do think what you're saying about being a good communicator is extremely important. Like, we always come back to Arteta with this.
Yep. Yeah.
But honestly, like, a big part of the Arteta thing has just been that, like, everybody bought in. And even when fans were unhappy, players always were coming out to the media and saying, like, we love him. I've never learned so much. Like, he's incredible. And the club clearly felt that way as well. Like, he was clearly able to walk into a room with the club hierarchy and be like, I've got a plan. I know what I'm doing. You need to give me time. And, like, basically, like, overwhelm them in that way. Chelsea do need that guy in the same way that Man United need that guy.
And I think also, if you're going back to the Arteta situation, the players that didn't buy in, he got rid.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Aubameyang went, Lacazette went. Like,
yeah, you don't really have that option at Chelsea.
No. And to be fair, like, there aren't many. I don't think there are many players at Chelsea that can really say much, right? Like, when Potter came in, I think there was obviously there was that rumor about how they'd made a joke about him being Harry Potter and stuff. And those players who like have some pedigree of winning the Champions League recently and so on and so forth, I guess kind of have maybe a little bit more of an ego to that side. Right now, the only player really who can go into next season maybe with a bit of a, okay, I need to be the star guy, is Cole Palmer. After the season he's just come off. And even him, I think, is someone who wouldn't be looking to do that. I think, especially when you hear of like how good someone like McKenna has been with his squad at Ipswich, like there's definitely room for that. The issue is this isn't Ipswich anymore. Like, and how does he deal with, say, the difference of dealing with one? It's funny, whenever people talk about these managers coming to a club much higher up, you go from, say, at a place like Ipswich, for every one staff member at Ipswich, there's like 4 at a club like Chelsea, or 3, or there's much more media duties you have to do, or a lot more things behind the scenes.
But this won't be totally alien to him, because like
he obviously had the time at Manchester United.
The Championship is like a highly watched league for one. Like, and Ipswich was such a huge story.
Yeah.
But yeah, the time at Manchester United, he's not going to turn up and they're like, by the way, the manager has to do this. And he'll be like, what? He'll be like, I know. Like, I know what it's like. And also, I do think, some of this is just like X factor that you can't predict. Like, sometimes there is a guy who just walks into a club and they're just like, these are my non-negotiables. And this is like what I believe. And this is how we're going to do it. And if you're going to hire me, that's the way I'm going to do it. And they have the kind of force of personality to like drive that home. And some guys don't have that. So I don't think it's necessarily like you have to be like, people always talk about, oh, well, it's great when they're like, a legendary player or something. And like, maybe it is.
Helps,
but
maybe,
like,
to some degree.
But sometimes as well, you just have somebody who just has the aura of like, I know exactly what I'm like. Klopp always had this aura.
Yeah.
Like somebody who's like, I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly how I want to play. Like you do what I say or you sit on the bench. And McKenna may be able to do that. And I do think that if McKenna takes this job, he's going to do it with his eyes open.
Yeah.
Like nobody now thinks that like going to Chelsea is this wonderful cushy job anymore, where you get paid a fortune and you get to spend a fortune. Everybody goes. If McKenna goes to Chelsea, I don't know. There's the part of me that if I were McKenna, I'd be like, I'd rather go United. Like because Chelsea now, I'm just like they might sack a perfectly good coach. I have no idea what the future of the squad is. I have relatively little control because there's a load of stuff that's like kind of baked in by financial considerations. Like in that situation, I'd be a bit like, this is going to be mental. And there are lots of downsides to taking this job. So if I'm going to take this job, I'm not going to turn up and be like, thanks so much for like giving me this Chelsea job. I was going to be in the Premier League anyway. Like I'm going to say, here are all the negatives of this job. And if you want me to put up with all these negatives, here are the positives I want. I want to have total control. I want to be able to bench somebody if I want, Yeah. I don't care that Enzo Fernandez costs 120 mil. If he's letting people run past him, bench. Like, stuff like that. If he's willing to do that, and I do kind of hope that after the way Poch has been treated, after the way Potter's been treated, Tuchel as well, that whoever comes in next will have the sense to say, I need to let them know from day one, like what the deal is. And say like, look, if you kind of break our agreement here, I'll just walk. I don't care. Like, I think that would be a good situation. Like, really, I do think Chelsea need a firm hand in the dugout now.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right to raise that element because, like, I think for a lot of managers looking in now, they go, okay, this ownership came in and you said things were going to be different to how Roman was, and under that era, and to a degree they are different. But you've brought, you sacked a perfectly good coach in Thomas Tuchel, where, don't get me wrong, things definitely didn't start well in the season because you wanted to put your guy in charge, and then you did that, and then you sacked him, and then you got another one, then you sacked him, and so that you definitely do need some sort of consistency, I think, as well, and belief too, to be able to do what you want to do. Go on.
I just want to ask you, like, what do you want stylistically from this next manager? Like, do you care, or are you just like, just get the best manager you can?
I think it's tough to say, right? Because I can't sit here and be like, oh, like McKenna, from what I've seen, has been incredible. Because you look at the way clubs play football in the Championship, and sometimes you've got to be very different when you come up to the Premier League. Look at how it's worked out for Burnley and Vincent Kompany. They've obviously not been too bad for Vincent Kompany because he's off to Bayern Munich. I think one of the most important things that Chelsea need is what you've said there, and also in terms of getting someone that communicates well. Like, I think Chelsea and the players need someone here. Like, I don't want to be in a situation, for instance, where you mentioned like it's been a year wasted with Poch, like to a degree. I don't want to be in a situation where in a year's time we are doing the same video because we've had to let go of whatever manager comes in, McKenna or whatever it might be, and go, okay, we're back to square one again. Like, who is the next young and progressive coach that's going to work out here? You need someone now, like whoever they pick now, can't be gone in a year's time. Can't be.
But they can't even not be gone. They have to be in the Champions League in a year's time.
Yeah.
Isn't that the bigger issue? Like Chelsea are making more signings at the moment, for which they do not have the money.
Well, two of them join in January. Gendry Perez joins in January, and the William Gustavo kid joins in January as well. Both this coming January.
Great.
Like, so even more,
okay.
Like, both are like 16, or one of them's like 6. He'll be like just turned 18.
And there are other positions you need, like you need like a CB,
but CB goalkeeper people talk about. Like,
I think you can. I think you can get by a goalkeeper, but it's more that I just kind of think like Chelsea have decided that they are going to spend.
Yeah,
like they're in a financial hole, and the way they get out of that problem is by getting Champions League football, and so what they could do is try and cut costs and still try and get Champions League football. But cutting costs doesn't really matter if you don't get Champions League. So it feels like they've basically said, well, we might as well spend a bunch of money and improve our chances of getting the Champions League. But that also means that whoever comes in, they're not saying it's a rebuilding year. You know, like, it's okay if you finish 6th. All we want is to see progress on the pitch. They're like, this guy who they're hiring, like, they're saying, it's so weird to me that they're like changing manager from Pochettino to somebody who will be less proven than him and saying, you are not a project. This is a win now situation. This is like a huge economic problem. Getting the Champions League. And like, maybe next year you have 5 places and like, you know, things are a little bit easier. But Spurs might go and like sign a 6 and a forward this year and be great. United might go and sign like 8 players. Like Liverpool, City and Arsenal are still going to be there. Newcastle probably won't have the same injuries.
I wonder how much, part of me kind of wonders how much the board think Poch did in terms of, like, part of me thinks, does the board think we got 6th place because of the players we've bought here? And actually, Poch, like, you've not done that much.
There's some, you can make that argument,
and then, so, like, okay, you get rid of Poch, and these players got 6th anyway.
Yeah, still got Palmer.
Like, still got Palmer.
Basically.
Yeah.
Still got Palmer. Palmer just managed.
He's not gone. And so it's like, okay, so essentially anyone we can get just can be better than this and like can take us to the next level and improve us in that like tactical shape and whatever. Like it only felt really like we started seeing...
That's a bet. You can make that
bet. Definitely a bet, yeah. And it only really felt like we started seeing some proper tactical play in the last month, to be fair. After that Arsenal game, when we started seeing then Cucurella kind of step into midfield and then he said Gallagher dropping a little bit deeper. And part of that was also due to like the Enzo injury, so kind of forcing it.
Sure.
But I wonder if they think like, okay, well, we kind of got 6th of just the players, and so
Jesus.
But if that's how low they maybe looked at, say, Poch's tactical play,
I guess. But then you're like, this is not necessarily a coherent bunch. You know, like these guys don't all play the same way.
They're all so young.
Like a load of them do positional play, but they don't all do it.
Yeah.
Like
they are all young enough to kind of learn it though. Like whatever manager you get into,
but they're not gonna like that isn't really how it works. Like people can add new strings to their bow as managers, and they can tweak stuff. But it's quite rare for somebody who's like not a positional play manager to become a positional play manager. No, sorry,
I'm on about more so the players in terms.
Oh,
of
right.
So
the players will be fine. The players will be fine.
Yeah,
but like, I don't know. I look at Hernes and Rangnick, who's apparently on the list, and then I look at De Zerbi, who I think is like quite Postecoglou-like. I don't know. I just sort of looked at Thomas Frank, who's much more of a pragmatist, I would say, and kind of willing to switch things up. He's quite Italian, I think, in that sense. I just look at this list of managers and I'm like, it's not terrible, as in like these are the guys that you would want to consider. But I don't really think there's a clear governing principle here, which is like, well, if you were like Liverpool, you'd be like, right, we've built a squad to play directly into press. And therefore, the managers we're going to look at next are like this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy, because they all are broadly in that style. Like, this is kind of like young, talented, cheap managers, except for the odd, like Rangnick, though he at least would be cheap, and has some experience as a firefighter. I don't know. I guess I'm just kind of like...
If you had to pick one out of that list, right, and
go through the list.
So... I think De Zerbi is an interesting one to talk about as well, because obviously he has left Brighton, and it's weird how he left, and then 2 days later, to that Poch or whatever, and there is supposedly a club that's bought out his thing. The list is McKenna, De Zerbi, Thomas Frank, Amorim, who doesn't actually seem like that's going to happen, Fabregas, Hunes, Mourinho, Michel. Is it Michel?
Michel. It should be. Yes. He's Spanish, right?
Yeah, and Michel, obviously, with what he's done at Girona. There are also a couple of ones that I added to, like Nagelsmann is going like after the Euros, but then do you need maybe a manager before the Euros, arguably? And this does, and what they have said is that this is going to be done before in days rather than like weeks and months.
I do think if Nagelsmann, if Nagelsmann didn't have the Euros, I'd probably just say Nagelsmann straight away. Though he'll probably cost more than the others, but I'd be like Nagelsmann. Like history of tactical flexibility, amazing attacking football, can succeed on a shoestring, good experience developing young players, can press, can do possessional play. Like we've seen him succeed with a team which was like not possession dominant and succeed with a team which is possession dominant, which is like maybe more of a question around like Thomas Frank, for example. not known to be an arsehole. Whereas like there are other guys there who are like De Zerbi. Willing, yeah, like De Zerbi's willing to be a dick. Like even Rangnick's willing to be a dick. Though I think Rangnick is a rational guy, but like he's not going to like sugar pill it for the press. I'd probably rule out. I really like Thomas Frank, but for whatever reason, I don't particularly like him for this job. I don't know. I probably would. I think I'd just go for Nagelsmann because I think Nagelsmann is basically an evolved De Zerbi. I think Nagelsmann is like a Charizard De Zerbi.
Do you not think it's the worst year for it though? Like in terms of like because of the Euros, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah,
like it sucks, but like that's on you. And you can have these talks earlier in the season. Like I wouldn't have sacked Poch without at least doing exploratory talks with a couple of these guys. Yeah.
So I don't think
what would you do? Which one would you go for? Because I just look at them and I'm like,
there's some really fun ones. Like Sebastian Hoeneß. Like you mentioned, those managers who in 5 years could be like one of the best in the world. He has a very good chance of that. Like he's got obviously his uncle being Uli Hoeneß, and like he actually
those are
tried to bring him in a
raw
pie.
Genetics though. Like that family is a bunch of dipshits. like everybody who's ever worked in the hierarchy at Bayern is like thick as two shot planks.
But what I will say is he rejected Bayern. And so, like, maybe that is a little bit smart. He's the one, the odd one there. But I think he's like a really, really interesting manager and got some fun stuff going on. But then, like, I can see that becoming like a Potter situation, if you get what I mean, where like things don't quite work out and he's gone before the end of the season.
And it's just an enormous... Yeah, but at least Potter was playing like structured possession football.
Yeah.
Whereas like... especially because the Bundesliga, and I think you could kind of talk about this on the basis of the Europa League final last night. Mm-hmm. The Bundesliga used to be like the pressing league, and this season that has not been the case at all. The hardest pressing sides in the Bundesliga don't really press as hard as the kind of middle pressing sides in like Spain. Right, that it just doesn't really happen anymore. And last night, Leverkusen looked like they had literally no idea what to do with an aggressive press. And Leverkusen are like way better as an in possession side than Stuttgart are. Yeah. So I kind of look at that and I'm like, well, the future of Chelsea as a top side is a future based on we have most of the ball. Can he do it? Like he can probably learn it, but can he do it now? Can he do it next season?
And that's the thing, for a lot of these managers, it has to be now. Like, you need, the jump up is, you got, as you mentioned earlier, got to get Champions League football. Another one who, I haven't mentioned it, but I've thought, like, is there a world where it could happen, was Inzaghi.
That would be great.
Like,
I think that would cost you a lot of money.
Inzaghi, to get him out of Inter, it would be very, very tough to do that. And then otherwise,
he would be fantastic, though. He would suit your talent. I think that would actually be, I mean, if you could get him... I would probably do that over Nagelsmann. Though I'd also be like, there's no way Inzaghi speaks English.
No way, definitely doesn't speak English. And also, like, I could see him getting, like, I know he works well with the Inter Milan board, and obviously the Inter Milan board is actually changing now, new owners and everything. But he's not necessarily like super young. What the other managers are compared to.
But he feels young, like in his career.
Yeah, definitely. But I don't know whether again the Chelsea board would be able to even get that done. And then it does leave you like it basically just leaves you one of these young managers like who have been managing for like 3-4 years and are super interesting. And like essentially, I kind of think maybe give it a go, I guess, and we'll see what happens. Like maybe. But there's no manager on this list that I'm like, go and get him. Like, again, the ones that I've brought to the table here is Inzaghi and that are ones that probably aren't possible. And so the Hoeneß, the Thomas Frank, the De Zerbi, the McKenna, there's no manager there that I'm sitting here going, oh my God, go and get him. And even De Zerbi,
that's true.
If De Zerbi was there next, like in the dugout next season, maybe it'd be good.
I think there's more to dream on, though, with McKenna and Hoeneß than there is with...
Roberto De Zerbi and Thomas Frank.
Yes. As much as I like those guys, like there's a flaw with them, which is really good. Mm-hmm. But Chelsea don't need to think about the flaw. They need to think about the ceiling.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't matter if, like, if McKenna could, like, 50% of the time he gets you top 4 and 50% of the time he finished 10th. That is better than a guy who, like, 80% of the time finishes, like, 6th or 7th. You have to finish in the Champions League spots. So I probably would be like, you know what, we've basically got to go like all or nothing on this.
Yeah.
And like go for the guy who might be a superstar and might be crap, like or not a superstar yet. It's better to do that and go for a guy who's definitely not a superstar but is good.
To be fair, someone who I don't think it's going to happen just because of the way it worked out with Liverpool and such. But Ruben Amorim, like I think he's really interesting, and like with the players that Chelsea have to our disposal, like I always think a 3-back system has suited Chelsea much better over the years. And that's not to say that he wouldn't necessarily go and change to a 4-back system, but he's also.
I think he wouldn't though. Like we talked about him. We talked about him on here, and we were like, well, you know, like we think he can be a bit more like flexible in formation. Like it's quite unusual for someone to be inflexible. And then there were reports coming out of some of his meetings, you know, with Liverpool, with West Ham, that were like, no, like this is the way I play. And that was like quite shocking to hear because it's just not a thing you hear anymore. So I don't know if you want to like go for the guy who's like
stuck on one kind of,
and you're like, well, you know what, this will be great for Cucurella and like Malo Gusto. But who else will it be great for? Like maybe it'd be good, but maybe not.
No, it's tough, man. It's really tough. Like I think one of the key things as well, you need a manager who's also going to be good at development. Like the whole Chelsea squad is development. Now that Thiago Silva's gone and like Chilwell has disappeared, every other player is just development. Like in every position, there is not a single player that is like at their peak / ceiling.
There is like Nkunku, Sterling. Like Nkunku's in his mid-20s, like so maybe he's not at his peak in terms of like being fit, 26? Playing for this side, but he is the player that he's going to be.
Okay, and Sterling. All right, you're right. Yes, Nkunku and Sterling. Everyone else is like you've got to now make these players better. Like even in the goalkeeping department, Petrovic and Sanchez, 2 players there who I think Sanchez is like 25, 26.
Yeah, Sanchez is really young as well for a keeper.
And then you look at the defence and like, okay, if you sell Trevor Chalobah and whatever, like they're all still youngsters. And like these guys need. And I always think, like, you know, it is easy. It's not easy, but it's easier as a manager to go, okay, I'm going to develop these 2 players when I introduce them to my squad, right? And then for whatever manager comes into here, they might look at the squad and go, well, the whole 11 isn't a finished article yet. And like every single player in every position that I've started isn't the finished article. Like, okay, you start in Nkunku and then you got one there who you know who he is. But everyone else is like guys that need time and need to be developed and have like an actual understanding of what I want them to do or like how they need to be playing and stuff. And that's not easy.
In a way, I think that's better than arriving at a squad where you're like, I know what all these guys are, and if they don't fit my football, they don't fit my football. Like I'd look at them and I'd be like, this is a squad that's like pretty good as is. And if a couple of these players kick on, it could be great. Like if Jackson just finishes his chances next season, and Nkunku plays like, you know, 25 90s,
things become
you get more out of Sterling than net zero. Like someone like Chilwell plays, James plays, like Caicedo is more like the Caicedo we saw as the season went on than the Caicedo of the beginning of the season. Then and someone like Cole will continue to develop. I don't know. I look at it and I think just by being here for this year, when a bunch of these players are in their second season in the Prem or go from 22 to 23, you know, I might get a lot of credit here. Like you remember when like Frank Lampard was there, people were like, well,
true,
he did do an amazing job with the youth, and you're like, no, he just actually they just had youth, they just had good youth players like Abraham, good, James, good, Mount, good, like all these guys were just good, like pretty good. I don't know, like you can, I guess I look at it and I just think, well, if they finished 6th,
they can finish.
Given how bad the season was, maybe like a couple of these guys kick on, injuries are a bit better, and actually like 4th is not that hard. Like it would be, I'd really have to be relying on like my judgment of the squad, and I certainly like, as me, do not feel like I could do that. But someone like Kieran McKenna might be like, I've kind of analysed these players and I actually do think that like there's a lot of potential here that could be tapped by just staying the course, keeping things stable, and a year of development.
Yeah. Because there's a worry for me slightly at the end of next season, like, okay, suddenly you've had these guys for 3 seasons now, or even a little bit longer, and they're not feeling like they're developing enough or like they're where they want to be. And like say Chelsea, for instance, right?
Bro.
Now, definitely. But now Poch has like got Chelsea 6th place, right?
Sure.
whatever manager comes in can't finish worse, like can't finish lower than that.
They can't even finish there.
Yeah, literally. They have to go above that.
Sure.
And so I think that is a real tough place to be. And then, like, at least with Poch, it kind of felt like you had an expectation of how Chelsea now were going to play, what the lineup was, what the formation was going to be, and like, okay, maybe instead of Cucurella, it's Ben Chilwell or it's Colwill or whatever, right? Maybe the centre backs interchange or whatever. Whereas now, again, it's like from day one, you've got to completely scratch, and maybe Chelsea go to a 3-back. Maybe Chelsea play a 4-3-3 or bring back 4-4-2, whatever the new manager comes in. Like, okay, they do have an idea of what worked at the end for Pochettino, and they may just kind of continue that. But it's all back to kind of square one again. And I feel like for the last couple of years now, that's been what's happening ever since they sacked Thomas Tuchel. It's just continually like, cool, let's get rid of, okay, Potter, what are you going to do? Okay, cool, now what are you going to do, Poch? And we'll see what happens with Kieran McKenna or Roberto De Zerbi or whoever it is. But I do agree that it needs to be sorted sooner rather than later. Like, we can't... It needs to be sorted arguably before the Euros start. Like, Chelsea and the players need to go into... out of the Euros knowing comfortably who the manager is, and the foundation's been set, and like they know who they're going on pre-season tour with, and the staff need to be sorted. Like, that needs to be done before the Euros start. And I think that is actually kind of what they're going to do.
Though I do think the positive of the Euros, in a way, is that you're not getting behind. If you say you were to hire Nagelsmann, it wouldn't be like he's arriving and every other manager in the league has had like 6 weeks of preparation that he hasn't had.
True.
Like, all those players are going to be away at the Euros. The ones who aren't, I guess, like, they might be working with the coach after a bit, but normally there's like 4 weeks off anyway.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. It's definitely not ideal. It's a problem. But I would also kind of say everyone's focus is going to be on the Euros. All those players are going to be at the Euros, or like most of them are going to be at the Euros. So like, you weren't going to get to work with them even if you were there from day one. You could do stuff behind the scenes and you can work with some of the youngsters, but like Nicholas Jackson's going to be there, but like... Well,
I think actually, if you think about the entire Chelsea squad, most of them aren't there.
Really?
Yeah, I think only Palmer. I think Caicedo has something with Ecuador. Did Cucurella go to Spain? Did he get picked up by Spain in the end?
I doubt it.
Maybe.
What about Colwill?
Colwill's injured. Hasn't been selected by England.
What about James? Is he still
James hasn't been selected by England.
I didn't pay attention to that. Okay, what about like guys like Badiashile?
Didn't be selected by France. Like, that's what I mean. A lot of these guys actually haven't been. And so, but you are right though in the fact that like these guys anyway are going to have 5 weeks off before they go back to, like, they won't go back to Chelsea until after.
No, but maybe that is a factor though then, because like if we're talking about it being about short-termism, and it kind of is, then like maybe you do just hire a guy who you're like, well, at least he's here day one, and we can be working on, you know, like set pieces and stuff. Like,
well, we've got to coach him for that. We just hire the Brentford guy.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
like,
no, I do agree.
And that's actually a great thing to do. Like, while you're trying to hire a coach, you'd be like, set piece coach, take training. Everybody learns to do a set piece. Like, great. Chelsea need that. Like, it's an untapped resource. And given that Ange Postecoglou is clearly extremely anti it, like that might be
even Poch was to a degree.
That might be your edge.
Poch, you know? One of Poch's things that he said was that he didn't want to work with a set piece coach.
And if Arsenal had won the league, they'd have won it, like not because of, but like to a large extent. Like
20 plus goals, wasn't it?
It was crazy. Yeah. Like, it was a record. Like, it's a huge factor. And you know, Sean Dyche used to like get mid-table finishes on the back of it. But anyway, I don't know, man. I just think it's like, I think it's a scary situation for Chelsea, because the bigger issue now is you're like, you can kick the can down the road a bit, but eventually you get to it. Like, you like, and if not this season, it will be next season. And so you can hire McKenna and you can say you have to finish top 4. And then if he doesn't finish top 4, you're like, oh, he's sacked. But then like, you've got to start again with a new manager. And more importantly, you've got all the financial consequences to deal with, which are scary, because that is when, like, Chelsea might not be at this point this summer, but the prospect of like next summer or something having to sell Cole Palmer is not off the table. Yeah. Like, Chelsea fans will say stuff like, we would never do that. And you're like, yes, you would. Yes, you would. Like, if it comes to it, the club might have to do that. And that might be like the only asset you have. And you'll get a prince's ransom for him, but still,
Champions League football helps without having
you
to.
You might have to do it.
So,
so it's one of those things where like Chelsea are just like in a like really quite a worrying situation. They're not going to get relegated, you know. because of this, I don't think. But also the other prospect that you've got coming this season is a totally different thing. But you've got, we have seen like points deductions this last season. Yeah. We are going to see, I hope, and to be honest, I expect like a serious punishment for Man City.
Yeah.
Like that could be crazy. Like I don't think they'll relegate them or anything, but they could do that. They could strip them of titles. And we are now in a world as well where the Premier League is trying to signal to the UK government, like, we can govern ourselves.
Yeah.
You don't need to step in and do it for us. And so if Chelsea are continuing to basically take the piss with their finances, the Premier League might say, we have to make an example of them.
Yeah.
We're going to have to dock them like 25 points because they are being ridiculous. And if they do that, then Chelsea are just like absolutely shafted.
Hopefully that won't be happening next season.
Well,
sure.
it'd be great.
I mean, the other thing as well, like one of the Chelsea are like they had to anyway, but they are very much got to hope that Man City do beat Manchester United as well to have a chance of playing in the Europa League, which obviously, say they don't make top
they really
four,
need that to happen.
Then they have the chance of winning the Europa League and getting Champions League football that way as well. They've also got to contend with next season. I think you might have forgotten this was a thing. The Club World Cup tournament.
Why are you in it?
Because we've won the Champions League in the last 5 years.
Jesus
yeah,
Christ.
There's like a few. I don't know if it's Arsenal.
More games.
I think you guys might be in it as well.
I don't want to be in it. We never win anything.
There's something
because we won the FA Cup in 2020.
Mate, there's something weird where like it's because it's not like the old. It's not the old kind of format where it was normally the Champions League winner just jumps in at the semis. Now there's like a league against the last 5 winners of the Champions League and like even more games that are happening in January or like
all these guys
next season.
I'm sorry, this season in the Premier League, like Liverpool, big injury crisis.
Chelsea,
Newcastle,
injury
United,
crisis.
Yeah, exactly. Spurs, like, and then there are the teams which like managed to
Villa.
Well, I know Villa fans were really angry last time. They said they hadn't really had injuries, but I was like, but my point was more like Ollie Watkins didn't get injured.
Yeah.
That would have been a big problem for you, like stuff like that. Because you could say the same about Arsenal. Like Arsenal, I'd say had a very fortunate season with injuries, but like obviously they wanted to play Thomas Partey. Unfortunately, he was injured basically the entire season. Jesus was injured pretty much the entire season. Timber was injured in the first game and only played again in the last game. Like, but we say that's a fortunate season with injuries. Like that's the situation we're now in with like injuries in the Premier League. So if you have a more grueling Champions League campaign, a more grueling Club World Cup, and you've already got a squad full of guys who like can't keep their feet on straight.
And they've just played the Euros.
Yeah, then I just look at it and I think this is going to be bad. But like maybe this is another reason that Chelsea also want all these young guys here because they're like they can soak up minutes in the Europa League. Yeah. We can probably sell them for a profit next summer if it comes to it. Some of them might turn out to be great, and one way or another we're just hoping. And it just feels like Chelsea have said, you've got to dance with the one that brought you. And like our strategy has been like buy these young guys, hope some of them pop, and live with the consequences. And to their credit, they're kind of doing it. They're kind of like saying, going to keep doing it, basically until the wheels come off. And like maybe it will work. But if it doesn't work, it's going to not work in such a spectacular fashion that like the fireball is going to burn a hole in the Premier League.
It's helped with Cole Palmer. Like Cole Palmer having the season that he did, like has ridiculously helped and like had a huge thing. And Caicedo,
no shit.
But also like Caicedo towards the end of the year, like improving massively. Gusto is another one who ended up being like a really, really good signing. There's a few now where you can look on and go, they ended up like even Madueke had a really strong end to the year. Petrovic, I always think Disasi was just fine. Like
but that's all right. That's what you needed from him. Like, you needed fine.
And a lot of players who went from maybe last year being like, oh my God, you were really bad, have now ended the season at, actually, you've been okay.
Yeah, like Kai Havertz.
Like Kai Havertz, who I will just quickly say
20 goals and assists in the league. It's 36.
But I don't feel like Kai has done anything he wasn't already doing at Chelsea. I genuinely don't.
Scored more goals.
But he was like...
He never hit double figures at Chelsea.
But he was getting like good... Did he not in all comps though?
Oh, sure, but he never hit 10 in the Premier League.
But in like...
He got 14 in the Premier League, 6 assists.
But point guys, I don't think he's like been that much better.
He's been quite a lot better, I think. He's put up his best. He's put up his best numbers. He's put up his best XG numbers. He's put up his best goal and assist numbers. He, that last game of the season, He had 9 shots in that game. And like he's kind of established himself as a centre forward in a way that I think like if Arsenal this summer are looking to spend money, there's just like an aside on Arsenal. Like I probably would have said this all along, but if you had a chance to say get like Frankie de Jong or like a big time striker, I do think it makes more. Yeah, I do think it makes more sense to spend the money on Frankie.
I'm just like I also think I was quite like a Kai like apologist as well. Not
that's true.
Like, I was always quite backing him at Chelsea, and so like
when he got a run up front for a bit under Tuchel, you're like you kind of saw it.
Yeah, and he missed a lot of chances like in Chelsea. I think actually maybe this time he started taking.
Like Nick Jackson.
Yeah, weird. But yeah, I don't know. Like I kind of feel like both parties are pretty happy. Like we got our 60 million, you got the Kai Havertz, and I think it's worked out not too bad there.
Yeah.
But okay, yeah. Finally, I guess with Chelsea, I don't really know. I just don't know what to say. I just feel like it's kind of tough because it's almost easier to talk about Chelsea once the manager's there. Like once you know who is in the dugout, because right now even it doesn't matter. Like whoever goes in there basically just has the same job that of reach top 4, develop players, and and get to the far in the Europa League. Like that's basically it.
I just think Chelsea fans are like insufficiently scared. Like Chelsea fans, a lot of them, you say stuff like, "This could all fall apart." Yeah. Like you might be in financial ruin. You'll start paying these contracts for years. You might slip down the league because you can't afford to remake the squad. Everybody's tied into long contracts. Like the whole point of the long contracts as well is that you get players at like below market rate. So you give somebody like a contract on like 100k a week, and 5 years down the line, he's still on 100k a week, even though he's maybe a 200k a week player. That's the whole point. And then they're like, oh no, we're going to give like Cole Palmer a new contract and like maybe Enzo one as well. And you're like, what are you doing? What's the point of this?
I saw Bowley actually talk about this in terms of like, apart from the amortization stuff, oh my God. He also said about like one of the things that they had and they were like really not happy with when they got into Chelsea was that they were in a situation where Rudiger and Christensen could just leave without getting any money for them. Like essentially they ran down their contract. And he was like, he basically said, every 8-year contract I've done is a 5-year contract to me. And it just means that when we get to the 5 years, like I have 2 years to sell you. And like, it's either, okay, you sign on the dotted line and continue your contract, or we sell you without having to worry about like, oh, you've got one final season.
But that doesn't make sense. But I'm sorry then. I'm just like, well then you understand even less than I thought you did. Because like, one, that player can be like crap and not worth the contract that you've got. And they're like, tough, you're paying me out for 3 years. And you're like, damn, this was also, we didn't lose you on a free, which is not that big a deal. Like, I think again, like that's such a kind of football manager like approach to it, where you're like, well, the worst thing in the world is to lose a player on a free. No, it isn't.
Yeah.
The worst thing in the world is to be like stuck in a contract paying a player every week for years to come when they contribute nothing. And you can't sell them because in order to sell them, you need to find a buyer who'll pay you a fee and will pay them a salary they'll accept. And if they're on 100k with you and they're like a 50k a week player, then like another club is going to say, well, we'll pay you 50k a week. And like, whoever it is, Mudryk, is going to say, no, I don't want to do that. And the pool of teams as well who can pay those kind of wages is small. It's essentially the Premier League plus a couple of clubs from each of the other divisions.
And like Saudi. Yeah.
Sure. So he can believe all he wants that's what's going to happen. But the whole point is, well, if that works the way you think it will, then that's great. If it doesn't work that way, then you're in trouble. Like, that's exactly the argument. And Rudiger leaving on a free is much, much better than being in a situation like... I'm trying to think of a really good example of somebody where you were just like...
Even Cucurella to a degree, right? Like, I know he ended the season really well, but for the majority of it, Cucurella was on like a, 6-year deal, was it?
And it's happened to every club at some point where you're like, we've got this guy, he's got a huge contract, we can't shift him because nobody wants him, we can't get money for him. You know, like, it's happened to United a bunch of times. It happened to Arsenal. Like, you just can't do it. You're like, how do we get this guy out of the club? Because we pay, like, good Premier League wages. So... I mean, it's not really Todd running the show anymore, is it? It's F. Barley, but
and the sporting directors.
But I don't know. I just think I'm intrigued to see where this is next year. I'm intrigued to see where it is 5 years from now.
I've said this every year since they've taken over. Give it another year and we'll see where we are.
What I don't think, though, is that in 5 years you'll be like winning the Premier League or winning the Champions League unless you get really lucky and like you sell a bunch of assets and you basically like can this project and kind of start again.
Yeah.
Like maybe next year you're like, right, we can just sell like 4 of these guys, make an enormous loss and something else happens or PSR gets relaxed. I don't know. But that's the situation we're in. Unless somebody's like, we will give you 200 million for Cole Palmer, which would suck for Chelsea. But on the other hand, I reckon that the club will probably be like, we might need to do this.
Yeah. No, well, there we have it. The final manager I'm going to pick, let's take Kieran McKenna. Welcome, Kieran.
Yeah, why not?
Hope you are ready for the rodeo because it's going to be a bumpy ride. And Pat went with Nagelsmann. Obviously, I think Nagelsmann is a very good choice if you can get him. But let me know what you guys think of the whole situation down below. Chelsea fans, let me know what you think as well. Should Pochettino have left? I feel like sacked is the wrong word to say because I don't think it was very much a sacking. But should he have mutually terminated his contract, as they have put it? Or should Chelsea have kept him for another year and see where they were the year after that? And who do you think should be in the dugout at Stamford Bridge? There we have it. Patrick Van Straten, thank you so much for joining me. If people at home would like to check you out, where can they go?
They can check out the Unseen Incidents podcast that I do with Pete Dorman. You can find us on your favourite podcast app, Unseen Incidents, or you can go to patreon.com/PatrickVS, where you can access both the public episodes and special exclusive bonus episodes. We're actually talking a bit about Chelsea this weekend. Going to talk about Champions League final. Going to talk about VAR. There's all sorts happening. We'll probably talk about company to Bayern because
that happened.
We were texting about it yesterday, and we were like, what's going on?
The world of football just continues to just blow my mind. It really does. Henry Hill will also be back very, very soon. 2 weeks.
Oh, cool.
2 weeks till he's back. So we'll see him here as well. Thank you guys so much. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and we'll see you guys very, very soon.